Hello, I'm Geoff Mitchell. I'm an executive member and past chair of the Global Membership Council, and I own GMA Certification Group, which is a private certification organisation in Australia. There are times when no matter what you do to prepare for a disaster, the situation is out of your control. The recent fires in Australia are an example of how a combination of Mother Nature and human behaviour can be the cause of significant damage and loss. The fire season in Australia is always a dangerous time. This season we're experiencing one of the worst droughts in decades, and this was exacerbated by the driest spring on record. The national average temperature was above 40 degrees Celsius, which is about 113 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was combined with intense strong winds. Some of the bushfire events were so large they were actually creating their own weather patterns. Human behaviour played a part in a significant amount of the property loss of over 3,000 homes. Significant fire events over recent years have resulted in a change in philosophy of stay and defend, which is one of the considerations in the bushfire standard. The current philosophy is lives over property, which sees authorities ordering evacuations and in some instances forcibly remove people instead of allowing occupants to stay and attend to EMBER attacks. These fires didn't distinguish if a structure was built to the latest building codes or to older building codes. So what can you do? It becomes a question of how do you rebuild your community to be more sustainable and resilient and to assist in mitigating the amount of damage in the future. Join us for the Sustainability Membership Council's Building Safety Month video on the Australian bushfires.
My name's Micallef. I'm an A3 certifier with the GMA Certification Group, and I'm here to talk to you today about the effects of the bushfires that have affected my property on the lower New South Wales coast. And just to give you a bit of a description on the events that happened, it was on the 1st of January 2020 when the fire front came through, and it crossed quite a significant amount of bushland to reach my property, which was a dwelling that closer to the beach side of the highway on the lower New South Wales coast, and it was a BAL 29 building that was code compliant and had quite a clear APZ area around the development. And consequently the fire front that came through was of such a magnitude that the house didn't stand a chance of survival because of just the magnitude of the flames that came through and the radiant heat that was in front of the fire front. So to explain it a bit further, to give you an idea on the type of building it was a hardy plank cladded building built to BAL 29 with quite a significant clearing. A lot of firefighting resources were part of the DA approval to keep the house APZ protected and the house protected, but unfortunately the house didn't survive the onslaught, and as a consequence the entire property was destroyed.
Michael, you said your home was code compliant. What happened to your house?
The house was destroyed in the bushfire attack. The fire front was active for a number of weeks in the area, but there was a significant river that separated the fire from my property. But as the fire progressed, it found a way to jump the river and came through some heavily bushland area to reach my property, and it intensified in its fire front by consuming that amount of woodland. And the fire front magnitude was quite severe by the time it got to my house. The tenants were evacuated by the Rural Fire Service for their own safety, and so there was nobody left on the property to fight the fire or to try and protect the buildings. And as a consequence, everything was destroyed. But having a look at the footage that was shown to me at the time that I went to visit the property, the intensity of the flames and the actual height of the fire front that came through, it was quite apparent that you could not have stayed and fought a fire that way, of that magnitude, and survived the radiant heat. no amount of protection would save lives in that onslaught, and that's quite evident by when I did go to the property and had a look inside the metal shed, which had tools and whatnot in metal containers that were, I thought would be salvageable. But when I did have a look at the inside the shed, as you might see in some of the photographs, that everything was completely destroyed by radiant heat, and what things were in metal cabinets were just destroyed.
Can you, I think you mentioned to me that the casings on your tools actually just melted away.
Yes, the casings on the nail guns, which were cast metal, were melted into just molten balls of metal, and totally shows you how much radiant heat was just coming through that shed, that it just dissolved most metals. There are a lot of metal items that were in that shed that have been dissolved completely. There is no remnants left of their existence. So having an onslaught of that magnitude with that heat, it's very unlikely that anyone could fight a fire of that magnitude, and it certainly gives way for developing new products and new ways of building that can sort of sustain that sort of an onslaught and maybe survive.
Are there any lessons you've learned from this experience that will help to make your property more resilient and more sustainable in the future?
Yes, I've taken a few things on board as far as the protection of the house against ember attack and radiant heat of that nature, and some of the things that I would implement in a new build would be sacrificial walls that can take the initial onslaught prior to reaching the house. Some materials that I've considered are perhaps the Hebel wall system that can withstand ember attack and radiant heat quite well. Some initiative elements that I'd like to see implemented in the buildings would probably be a heat-proof foil wrap underneath the cladding. That's more resilient to heat, and perhaps a pressurised sprinkler system that can work without the need of electricity, that can give some spray over the house for at least 120 minutes. And with the other materials, I'd be looking at trying to reach a fire protection level of 120 minutes prior to it reaching the actual structure of the building.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Join us for the next edition of the Sustainability Membership Council's video series, Voices from Building Safety Month.